Welcome to Your Life As, where you get to live the life of someone from history, minus the awkward battles, bad decisions, and serious consequences. Experience the glory, the drama, and the excitement, but skip all the hard stuff. We're talking about the perks, the power, and none of the hassle. Each week you'll step into the past and live a legendary life, without worrying about the messy details. So buckle up, hit subscribe, and get ready to live the life without the headaches. Welcome to Your Life as Sir Charles Spencer Chaplin. You think you want to be me? Oh, so you want to be Charlie Chaplin, the tramp with the bowler hat, the cane, the waddle, and that stupid little toothbrush mustache that has aged about as well as milk left on a radiator. You've seen the clips, black and white, silent, me dancing around like a lovable idiot, while the world falls apart in the background. You've probably even thought, wow, he had it all. Fame, talent, women, influence. What a life. Let me stop you right there, kid. You have no idea what you're wishing for. You think you want the applause, the magazine covers, the crowds gathering outside your hotel like you're the second coming of Buster Keaton's more charming cousin. You think you want to be the icon of cinema, the face that made the whole planet laugh during a depression so deep it could have swallowed the Mariana Trench. You think you want to be universally adored. But let me tell you something about universal adoration. It's just mass delusion with better lighting. And the silent film thing, oh, don't romanticize it. People think silence is classy now because they've seen too many TikTok edits with piano music slapped on top. Back then, silence was just me working my ass off to tell a joke with my face, while some over-caffeinated pianist in the corner banged out Maple Leaf Rag for the 1000th time. You think it's dignified? Try doing 60 takes of the same pratfall until your kneecaps are ready to unionize. Try making your audience laugh without a single word while also making sure your hat never falls off, and your mustache glue doesn't melt under the stage lights. But oh no, people don't think about that. They think about the romantic stuff. The trench coat flapping in the wind, the gentle nod, the poetic little turn of the cane before walking off into the sunset. That's the Chaplin they see, the magic trick. Not the guy with sweat dripping down his back in a sweltering studio, screaming internally because the camera jammed halfway through the perfect take. You think I just stumbled into stardom, don't you? That I waltzed into Hollywood and the world collectively decided I was the perfect blend of Dickensian misery and slapstick genius. Well, yeah, I did become that, but not before clawing my way out of a childhood that looked like the set of Oliver Twist if you took away all the cheerful singing and added more rats. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up so broke the idea of poor sounded aspirational. My father drank himself into oblivion before I could even figure out what the word father meant. My mother, bless her, was talented, beautiful, and one nervous breakdown away from a padded cell. And she took that breakdown, by the way. Full ride. But sure, envy me, because I made it out. Because I danced on tightropes and roller skated near open elevator shafts. Because I kissed leading ladies and made satire so sharp it gave entire governments heartburn. You see the films and think, God, he must have been so happy. Newsflash, I wasn't waltzing through daisies between takes. Half the time I was fighting studios, the other half I was avoiding tabloid vultures who wanted to dissect my love life like it was a frog in biology class. And speaking of love life, oh boy, do you really want mine? Let's just say I collected marriages like some people collect stamps. 4 wives, multiple scandals, and enough awkward May-December headlines to make a Victorian faint. The public lapped it up because nothing says national pastime like pretending to be shocked at the same thing over and over. Meanwhile, I was just trying to balance being the world's clown with being the world's most talked about moral cautionary tale. And fame? Fame is the world's most expensive leash. Sure, it comes with champagne and hotel suites, but it also means you can't sneeze without someone interpreting it as a political statement. It means every frame of film you've ever been in will be replayed, analyzed and misquoted until people start remembering things you never actually did. I had to watch the symbol I built, the tramp, turn into a marketing tool for a nostalgia industry I didn't even believe in anymore. People wanted him, not me. And God help you if you start to think the person on the screen is the person in the mirror. That way lies madness. Oh, and let's not forget politics. I wasn't just making movies, I was taking swipes at dictators when most of Hollywood wouldn't even say the word Hitler out loud, and I paid for it. The same country that made me a superstar suddenly decided I was suspicious, un-American, dangerous even. You know how humiliating it is to be the most famous man on earth, and still have to defend yourself against rumors that you're a communist spy because you made one speech about human decency. America loved me right up until it didn't, and then it practically gift-wrapped me for exile. So do you still want to be me? Do you still want to dance in the spotlight knowing that behind it is a firing squad of gossip columnists, politicians, and moral crusaders who'd love nothing more than to watch you trip? Do you still want the applause that dies in your ears 5 minutes after you step off stage, leaving you with nothing but the echo and the smell of grease paint in your clothes? Because here's the truth, and I'll give it to you straight. No pratfall. Being Charlie Chaplin was brilliant. It was exhausting. It was ridiculous. It was lonely. I built a kingdom out of celluloid and rubbery facial expressions, and when the lights went out, I was still just the boy from the slums of London, wondering how the hell he got here. You want that life? Be my guest. Just don't come crying to me when you realize that every laugh you earn is just another way of hiding the sound of your own silence. Born to be a punchline. If you're expecting some romantic humble beginning story, you can drop that violin right now. My origin isn't some sepia-toned Dickens-approved tale where hardship builds character and everyone sings a moral lesson in the final act. No, my beginning was the kind of mess you'd cut from a script for being too depressing, even for an Oscar bait drama. I was born in 1889 in London, which at the time was basically one giant brick chimney pumping out industrial misery. I came into this world in a boarding house so cramped you could smell other people's dreams rotting in the wallpaper. My father, Charles Chaplin Sr., was an alcoholic music hall singer, and before you imagine some tortured artist with a heart of gold, let me be clear, the man could carry a tune but not a family. He left us quicker than a bad act gets booed off stage. That was my role model, a man who could hit high notes but couldn't stick around long enough to pay for groceries. My mother Hannah was a singer too, and honestly, she was talented enough to think she deserved better, which plot twist didn't stop the universe from feeding her to the wolves. She worked the stage until her voice gave out, then worked whatever odd job she could find until her mind started slipping gears. And I don't mean she got a bit sad, I mean full, tragic mental breakdowns that sent her in and out of asylums like they were Airbnb rentals. I loved her, but growing up with her was like living on a ship that could sink at any moment, and the captain's humming show tunes while patching holes with wet tissue. We were poor, not the couldn't afford the latest gadgets kind of poor you moan about today. I'm talking watered-down soup for dinner poor, the pawn your coat for rent poor. Some days the highlight of my diet was licking the flavor off yesterday's bread. You ever been so broke you start thinking in terms of which possessions you can turn into food? That was Tuesday for me. School? Sure, I went. When I wasn't dodging truancy officers or too busy working to help my mother keep the lights on. I learned quickly that education wasn't going to be my ticket out. My grades were about as reliable as my father. But I did discover something in those early years: I could make people laugh, and when you're a scrawny kid in threadbare clothes, making people laugh isn't just a party trick, it's survival. If you're funny, people like you. If people like you, they're less likely to notice the holes in your shoes or the fact that you haven't eaten all day. And London in the 1890s, perfect training ground for a comic. The place was crawling with characters, drunkards, preachers, pickpockets, ladies selling fish with more attitude than class, and policemen who looked like they were drawn from memory by a half-drunk child. It was theater every day, and I was studying without even realizing it. I'd watch how people moved, how they stumbled, how they tried to hide embarrassment, all the little absurdities of life. I didn't know it yet, but I was building the blueprint for a character the whole world would one day mistake for me. The first time I actually set foot on stage, it was by accident, and I mean that literally. My mother was performing when her voice cracked mid-song. She sent me out there to stall, and somehow I managed to win the crowd over. A little kid, trying to act like a grown-up, getting laughs for just existing. It was my first hit, and here's the twisted part. The rush of that applause hit harder than any meal I'd eaten that week. You think heroin's addictive? Try hearing a crowd cheer for you when you're 9 years old and starving. But don't think for a second that was the beginning of some golden childhood of fame. No, after that little spark, life went right back to kicking me in the teeth. My father died when I was 12, liver failure, because of course he did. My mother's health kept spiraling, so I spent time in workhouses and charity homes, the kind of places that make prison look like a wellness retreat. Those places didn't just feed you, they trained you in humility. And by humility, I mean learning how to shut up, eat your gruel, and pray the bigger kids didn't decide you were tonight's entertainment. It's funny, people now look at my films and talk about the poetic underdog spirit, or the gentle empathy for the downtrodden.
Yeah, sure. That wasn't philosophy.
That was me holding up a mirror to the world I came from. I was the tramp before I ever put on the hat and cane. I didn't have to research poverty. I lived it, and the cane. Oh, that's just a prop. The limp? That's called muscle memory from walking around in worn-out boots half a size too small. So yeah, my origin story isn't glamorous. It's not inspiring in the Disney sense. It's just raw, dirty, unsentimental. I didn't rise from nothing. I crawled through it, stepped over it, and sometimes slept in it. And the whole time I learned how to make people laugh about it, because the alternative was crying, and I never liked giving an audience tears for free. You think you want my beginnings? Go ahead. But don't forget, before I was Charlie Chaplin, I was just a hungry kid in a rotting city, waiting for life to either kill me or clap for me. And honestly, some days, I wasn't sure which one I wanted more. If my life up to this point was a slow crawl through mud, my so-called rise to fame was like slipping on a banana peel and accidentally landing on a throne. People love to imagine there was some grand plan, that I studied theater, built connections, and strategically climbed the ladder of show business. The truth? I stumbled into it like a drunk falling into the VIP section. I started young in the theater circuit, doing comedy bits and playing in cheap music halls that smelled like stale beer, sawdust, and bad decisions. These places weren't glamorous. They were the entertainment equivalent of a back-alley poker game. I learned timing not from professors but from drunks heckling me mid-act. You don't know stagecraft until you've had to save a joke while dodging a half-eaten meat pie flying toward your head. By my teens, I was touring with a theater troupe, a ragtag group of overworked actors, failed singers, and people so addicted to applause they'd perform to an empty chair if it clapped for them. We did everything: slapstick, melodrama, whatever paid. I got decent at it, which is to say I was slightly less bad than everyone else. Then, by some cosmic fluke, I got noticed. Not by a talent scout in a crisp suit, mind you, but by a guy named Fred Carno, whose troupe specialized in physical comedy. They called it funny business, but really it was a series of humiliating stunts designed to make the audience roar: pratfalls, pie fights, you name it. Perfect for someone like me who was too skinny to intimidate anyone and too restless to stand still. Carno took me to America in 1910, and let me tell you, stepping off the boat in New York, back then, was like opening a door into another planet. The noise, the chaos, the smell of ambition mixed with horse manure, magical. I was there to perform, but in reality, I was just trying not to drown in the scale of it all. The shows went well enough, but nobody looked at me and thought, yes, this man will change cinema forever. At best, I was that British guy with the funny walk. Then fate, or maybe just dumb luck, did me a favor. In 1913, some film guy from Keystone Studios saw me on stage. Keystone was the fast food chain of silent movies, cheap, fast, and if you consumed too much, you'd probably get sick. They hired me for $150 a week, which to me was the GDP of a small country. I didn't know anything about movies. I'd never even acted for a camera. My first day on set, I had no clue where to stand, how to face the lens, or why everyone was obsessed with hitting marks. I thought marks were people you conned. So I improvised. I grabbed a bowler hat, a cane, and glued on that ridiculous mustache, mostly so I'd look older and hide my baby face. The walk? Made it up on the spot. It wasn't art, it was desperation. And somehow people loved it. The Tramp was born not out of genius, but because I didn't know what else to do. And once he was out there, that little mustached drifter took on a life of his own. Within months I went from some British guy in the background to the guy people came to see. The Tramp was funny, sure, but he was also pathetic, romantic, and stubborn, basically me in a costume. I didn't just act him, I was him, and the public couldn't get enough. Studios started throwing money at me like I was a slot machine that never lost. My salary skyrocketed. I went from broke workhouse kid to the highest paid entertainer in the world by age 26. But here's the thing nobody tells you about sudden success. It doesn't feel real. One day you're counting pennies for a loaf of bread, and the next you're in a mansion wondering why the hell you have 3 sitting rooms and still no idea how to be happy. I was in every newspaper, every theater, every conversation. The press called me a genius. I didn't feel like a genius. I felt like an imposter who was one bad gag away from being sent back to London in a cardboard box. People think I took Hollywood by storm. No, I snuck in through the side door, tripped over the furniture, and accidentally sat in the king's chair. And by the time anyone realized, I'd already redecorated the place. And yet, for all the hype, I couldn't shake the feeling that the whole thing was absurd. I was getting rich pretending to be poor. I was adored for playing a man everyone in real life would ignore. The Tramp was beloved. Charlie Chaplin, the man behind him, was still figuring out why the applause never seemed to reach him when the cameras stopped rolling. So yes, my rise shouldn't have worked. But it did. And in Hollywood, that's the only qualification you need. Just be the last fool standing when the lights come up. The people who rode my coattails. Ah yes, the entourage, the hangers-on.
The opportunists.
The collection of human barnacles who clung to the good ship Chaplin from the moment it left the dock. You can't become the most famous entertainer in the world without attracting a swarm of people who see you less as a person and more as a walking ATM with a cane. Let's start with the studios. Keystone, S&A, Mutual, First National, each one swore they were helping me build my legacy, when in reality, they were just trying to figure out how to squeeze every last frame of film and every last dollar out of me. In those days, a studio contract was like a marriage, where only one partner gets to keep the house, the kids, and the dog when it's over. I was their golden goose, and they were the farmers fattening me up, not out of love, but because roast goose pays better than live goose. Then there were the so-called friends. You know the type. They laugh at every joke, even the bad ones. They're always just passing through your neighborhood when they happen to drop by your mansion for dinner. And somehow, they never ever reach for the bill. I had a whole circle of people whose main contribution to my life was telling me how brilliant I was, which, by the way, is the fastest way to make sure someone stops being brilliant. And then we get to the women. Yes, plural. Look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I had a weakness for young, beautiful women. And Hollywood was basically a buffet. But here's the thing about romance when you're famous. You never really know if they love you or if they love the idea of you. I had relationships where I was convinced it was passion, only to find out later it was networking. Some were after the name, Some were after the money, and a few were just after the drama. And oh, did they get it. My love life became a tabloid serial, part romance, part farce, part courtroom drama. And let's not forget the lawyers. Dear God, the lawyers. Entertainment lawyers, entertainment lawyers, entertainment lawyers, divorce lawyers, contract lawyers. They were the silent partners in my career, the ones who always managed to get paid whether I was making a hit or digging my own grave. Even politics got in on the act. During the 1940s, my popularity became a convenient tool for people looking to score points. I gave speeches about unity and peace, not exactly radical concepts, and suddenly half of Washington decided I was a subversive threat to democracy. Meanwhile, every newspaper editor who smeared my name was making a tidy profit off the scandal. Funny how that works. And then of course there was my audience. Yes, even you lot. Don't think I didn't notice how quick people were to demand more. More films, more laughs, more Chaplin, while never once stopping to consider the toll it took. I was their dancing puppet, and as long as I kept the hat tilted just right, and the cane twirled at the right angle, they'd cheer. But the moment I tried something different, a speech, a serious scene, an opinion, suddenly I was losing my touch, or getting political. You loved the tramp, but the man who created him, that was a harder sell. The truth is, every great career has a hidden cast list of people who got rich, famous, or influential just by orbiting close enough to the star. My coattails were so crowded, it's a wonder I didn't trip over them and break my neck. And here's the kicker, most of them are remembered as part of my success story, as if their leeching was some noble contribution. History has a funny way of turning parasites into patrons. So yes, I had talent. I had drive. I also had a small army of people ready to wring every drop of value out of me while smiling for the camera. And the worst part, half the time I let them. Because when you're at the top, it's easy to mistake exploitation for admiration. But don't worry, I wasn't done yet. I still had my golden era ahead of me. Spoiler, it shines a lot less when you're looking at it from the inside. Ah yes, my golden era. The stretch of time every documentary romanticizes with soft piano music, slow fades and critics whispering words like genius and visionary as though they've just witnessed Moses parting the Red Sea. From the outside it looked like a fairy tale, the tramp at his peak, the world at my feet, the newspapers calling me the most famous man alive. Inside, it was less storybook magic and more high-functioning madness with good lighting. Let's get one thing straight. My so-called golden years were not a stroll through a field of roses. They were a frantic juggling act, where I played director, actor, writer, composer, editor, and on bad days, therapist to my own neuroses. I didn't just make films, I micromanaged them into existence. Every frame had to be perfect. Every gesture had to land. If you sneezed on my set, I'd probably make you do it again, but this time in character. People love to talk about The Kid 1921 like it was this touching, effortless masterpiece.
Do you know what it actually was?
Months of me obsessing over a 6-year-old co-star while rewriting scenes at 3 a.m., convinced that the world would end if his tear rolled down the wrong cheek. City Lights 1931, hailed as my magnum opus, took me nearly 3 years to make. 3 years, on a silent film. In an era where studios could crank out features like sausages. But no, not me. I had to reinvent the wheel every damn time, because apparently I thought perfectionism was a charming personality trait. And Modern Times 1936. People call it bold social commentary. I call it my slow descent into paranoia about industrialization played for laughs. Sure, the gags worked, the critics raved, but behind the scenes I was one bad take away from strangling someone with my own bowler hat. My films weren't made in joy. They were forged in stress, sleepless nights, and the constant suspicion that one day audiences would wake up and realize I was just a guy in oversized shoes. The ego didn't help. I'd love to tell you I stayed humble, but when you've got entire nations lining up to see your work, humility becomes about as easy to find as a quiet street in New York. I started believing my own press clippings. I thought I could do no wrong, spoiler I could, and would, repeatedly, but in the moment I was convinced I was untouchable. Hollywood royalty, a cinematic prophet with a cane. I practically floated into meetings, not out of grace, but because my ego had its own helium supply. And here's the uncomfortable truth: the golden era isn't golden when you're living it. Sure, there's glamour, the premieres, the adoring crowds, the money, but there's also the gnawing awareness that it can all vanish overnight. Fame is like balancing on a tightrope over a canyon while juggling knives. You can't enjoy the view because you're too busy hoping your next step doesn't send you plummeting into obscurity. So I worked, and worked, and worked, because if I stopped, even for a moment, the fear would catch up, fear that the public would move on, fear that the tramp would stop making them laugh, fear that maybe I'd already peaked, and was just coasting on a character who had become bigger than me. I wore that little mustache like a crown, but make no mistake, it was also a noose. People remember those years as the height of my artistry. I remember them as the height of my exhaustion. But hey, at least they looked good in black and white, and in Hollywood, looking good is half the battle. The other half is pretending you're not cracking under the weight of your own legend. But don't worry, every golden age ends. And mine, oh mine ended with all the grace of a pratfall into an open manhole. Every great downfall has a star of the show, a fatal flaw that struts in wearing your favorite jacket, makes itself comfortable, and quietly burns your house down from the inside. For me, it wasn't booze, it wasn't gambling, it wasn't even the parade of disastrous relationships though, let's be honest, those didn't exactly help. No, my fatal flaw was a toxic cocktail of control freakery and believing my own myth. See, I didn't just like to be in charge, I needed to be. I didn't trust anyone else with my films, my scripts, my lighting, my music. Hell, if I could have played every role myself, I probably would have. When I directed, it wasn't collaboration, it was my way or I'll fire you before lunch. My sets weren't workplaces, they were kingdoms, and I was the absolute monarch with a bowler crown. That level of control produces beautiful art, and it also produces enemies, resentment, and the occasional crew member fantasizing about dropping a sandbag on your head. But that wasn't the whole problem. The other half was this. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking I was more than just an entertainer. I began to believe I was a philosopher, a prophet, a man who could single-handedly reshape the moral compass of humanity with a speech at the end of a comedy. I made The Great Dictator 1940. And don't get me wrong, it was bold, it was necessary, it ticked off all the right villains. But it also confirmed something dangerous in my head, that my audience would follow me anywhere. That they weren't just there for pratfalls and pathos, they wanted my wisdom. Once that seed was planted, I couldn't resist watering it. I started weaving politics into everything. I wasn't just the tramp anymore, I was a public moral conscience. Half the world doesn't want a clown to get serious, and the other half will dissect every word you say until it bleeds. Suddenly, I wasn't just an artist, I was that suspicious foreigner with un-American ideas, a favorite chew toy for every politician looking to score headlines by punching the world's most famous little man. And then there were the, let's call them romantic miscalculations, worrying young women, when you're not exactly young yourself, scandal, multiple divorces, scandal, paternity lawsuits. Oh, you better believe scandal. The newspapers had a field day. I was box office gold, but I was also tabloid uranium, and while I could take a pratfall for a laugh, I couldn't pratfall my way out of the courtroom. The real kicker, I thought I could outsmart it all. I genuinely believed that my talent, my record, my contributions to art would shield me from the consequences. Spoiler, they didn't. Fame isn't a shield. It's a spotlight, and the brighter it shines, the easier it is for everyone to see the cracks. So what ruined me? It wasn't one thing. It was a slow drip poison, a mix of ego, stubbornness, politics, scandal, and the inability to just shut up and make movies when that's all the public wanted from me. I built an empire out of laughs, then decided to test how much serious truth the audience could swallow. Turns out, they preferred the laughs. The golden era was over, and in its place, a circus. And guess who was the clown in the center ring? You know what's worse than being a clown? Being a clown who doesn't get to decide when the show is over. At my peak, I was the one pulling the strings, the timing, the gags, the heartfelt moments. I could control how people laughed at me. But once the tide turned, that control was gone. The world didn't laugh with me anymore. It laughed at me, and that, my friend, is a whole different circus act. It started small. A couple of political cartoonists exaggerating the mustache, poking fun at my speeches. A few gossip columnists who turned Charlie Chaplin artist into Charlie Chaplin scandal magnet. I'd read the headlines and think, okay, they're just jealous. But jealousy doesn't get you full-page spreads and smear campaigns. What gets you that is when the public decides you're fair game. And when they turned, oh, they turned fast. My personal life was a buffet for the press. Divorces, lawsuits, paternity cases, whispers about my politics. America loved me until I started giving them reasons to question me, and then it loved to eat me alive. It was like watching a crowd that once applauded you now gather to throw tomatoes, and the worst part was, some of them were still smiling while they did it. The final act of humiliation, being hounded out of the country I'd given my career to. One day I was Hollywood royalty. The next I was on a boat to London, advised not to come back without clearance from the US government. Imagine being told you're too suspicious to live in America by the same people who once begged you to sell war bonds and entertain the troops. The same people who had built entire movie palaces just to show your films now wanted you gone. And while all that was happening, the tramp, my creation, my alter ego, my meal ticket, became a mascot for an image of me that no longer existed. Studios re-released my old films like museum exhibits of a man who had apparently already died artistically. People laughed at the character without realizing the man behind him was across the ocean, reading about himself in the papers like some tragicomic obituary. It's a strange kind of hell, watching yourself become a parody in real time. I'd go out in public and strangers would waddle past me in imitation, twirling imaginary canes, as if I'd be flattered. I wanted to say, congratulations, you've boiled down 30 years of my work into a 2-second joke, but I didn't. I just smiled, because that's what clowns do. And the irony, I had built my career on mocking the powerful, the pompous, the absurd, and now I was the punchline. I was the powerful man brought low, the pompous artist exposed, the absurd character wandering without a stage. My life had become one long silent gag, only this time the fall wasn't choreographed, and I didn't get up at the end. The public clown parade marched on without me, and the worst part, I could still hear the music. Ah, my enemies. The rogues gallery. The ones who sharpened their knives on my reputation until there was nothing left but shavings. Some of them were real. Some of them were figments of my paranoia. And some were both real people who got even bigger and scarier inside my head. Let's start with the obvious. The press. Oh, the press and I had a relationship for the ages. Passionate in the beginning, toxic in the middle, homicidal by the end. They built me up as a genius, the everyman hero in baggy pants. Then when the winds shifted, they tore into me like a pack of hyenas that had just spotted a limping gazelle. One week I was Charlie Chaplin, master of comedy. The next I was Charlie Chaplin, degenerate foreign radical with a taste for scandal. The same reporters who once kissed my ass in print were now picking it apart sentence by sentence. And then there was J. Edgar Hoover, the man who could take a sneeze and turn it into a communist plot. Hoover didn't like me. Maybe it was my politics. Maybe it was my accent. Maybe it was the fact that my mustache reminded him of someone else's. Whatever the reason, the FBI had a file on me thick enough to stop a bullet. They shadowed my movements, combed through my life, and when the time came, they made sure my vacation to Europe in 1952 turned into a permanent relocation. Nothing says land of the free like telling the world's most famous comedian don't come back. And the politicians, oh, they loved me when I was useful, when I was selling war bonds or lampooning Hitler. But the second I started talking about peace, poverty, or, heaven forbid, criticizing their shiny version of America, suddenly, I was a dangerous foreign influence. Never mind that I'd been making their voters laugh for decades. I wasn't playing their game anymore, and that made me a liability. I had enemies in the industry too, people who'd been waiting years for me to trip so they could take my place in the spotlight. They smiled to my face, called me Charlie in that warm brotherly tone, and then slipped poison into the public's ear the moment my back was turned. Some were actors, some were producers, some were just professional gossips. Hollywood is a small town in the worst possible way. Everyone knows your business, and half of them are actively rooting for your funeral. But here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of my enemies lived in my own head. Once the paranoia set in, I started seeing plots where there were none. A lukewarm review? Clearly sabotage. A co-star who wanted more lines? Clearly trying to edge me out. My brain became a conspiracy board strung together with red yarn, and at the center of it all was me. I'd spent so many years controlling every frame of my films that I thought I could control real life the same way. Spoiler, you can't. The real twist? Some of the people I thought were enemies were actually trying to help. But by that point, I couldn't tell the difference. When you've been adored and vilified in equal measure, trust starts to feel like a luxury you can't afford. So enemies real or imagined, I kept them close, not out of strategy, but because I didn't know how to function without them. You take away a man's villains, and sometimes he realizes he's been fighting shadows the whole time. And just when I thought I'd find redemption, well, that brings us to my grand, glorious comeback. Or, more accurately, the sad little balloon of a comeback that popped before it even got off the ground. You'd think after being exiled from the country where I'd built my entire career, I'd have the sense to slink quietly into retirement, maybe buy a cottage in the English countryside, grow roses and glare at strangers through the curtains. But no, I was Charlie Bloody Chaplin. I didn't do quiet, I did comebacks. At least that's what I told myself. Here's the thing about comebacks. They live best in the minds of the people making them. In my head, I'd sweep back onto the scene, older but wiser, my genius undimmed. The public would rise to its feet in thunderous applause, critics would cry into their typewriters, and Hollywood would beg me to forgive its foolishness. Reality, well, reality had other plans. I started with A King in New York, 1957. My big cinematic return. It was sharp, it was satirical, it was biting commentary on American politics and consumerism. And boy, did I think I'd nailed it. Except for one small problem. No one in America actually saw it. Turns out, when you've been accused of being a communist and publicly booted out of the country, the US market isn't exactly lining up to promote your new work. It did modest business in Europe, where people still thought of me as the lovable underdog. But even there, the applause had a polite, well, bless his heart for trying, quality to it. I told myself it was just the warm-up. Then came A Countess from Hong Kong, 1967. A full-color romantic comedy with Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren. I was convinced this was the masterstroke. Bring in big stars, give it a touch of glamour, and watch the world swoon. What actually happened was Brando hated me. The critics hated the film, and audiences stayed home in numbers so large you could hear the echo in the theater lobby. It tanked so hard it practically left a crater. By that point I realized something ugly. The tramp had aged better than I had. The public's image of me was frozen in time. Bowler hat, baggy pants, silent gags. But here I was, older, slower, making talkies in color, trying to deliver charm that just didn't fit the world anymore. The magic had been a product of its time, and that time had moved on without me. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, why that the work was still art, why that I was still an artist, why the truth is, I wanted the validation. Instead, I got tepid applause, a few scattered reviews calling me a relic and a creeping awareness that the comeback wasn't coming back at all. That's when it hit me. Comebacks are really just ego trips with better PR. I hadn't returned to reclaim my crown. I'd returned to prove to myself that I still mattered. And when the world didn't throw a parade, I had to face a truth I'd avoided for years. Maybe the parade was over. But don't worry, I didn't bow out gracefully. Oh no, I still had one last act to play, and it was the kind of ending you'd expect from someone who'd spent his life making people laugh while quietly bleeding behind the curtain. You don't get to choose your ending, not in life, not in show business. If you're lucky, you fade out quietly. If you're unlucky, you get dragged off stage mid-act. Me, I got a bit of both. After the spectacular thud of my so-called comeback, I retreated to Switzerland, not because I had a deep love for yodeling and neutral politics, but because it was quiet, and quiet, after decades of lights, cameras, and scandal, is both a blessing and a curse. Life there was slower. I had Una, my last wife, yes, last, as in final chapter of that particular soap opera, and a small army of children who seemed determined to repopulate the cast of Oliver by themselves. We lived in a big, beautiful house by Lake Geneva.
It should have been peaceful.
Idyllic even, and sometimes it was. But if you think a man who spent his life being the center of the world can just slip into domestic anonymity, you're kidding yourself. I still worked, of course, tinkering with ideas, writing, convincing myself I might one day return with something new. But my days of controlling the industry were over. Hollywood had moved on to newer, shinier toys. I'd gone from the front page to the trivia section. From greatest living actor to Remember That Guy, and the part that really stung. They remembered me best as the tramp, the silent, smiling, eternally young drifter, not the man I'd actually become. The world loves to romanticize endings. They want the hero to go out with one last triumph, to stand in the spotlight, hear the applause, and smile knowingly. My reality was a little more bureaucratic. I got a knighthood from the Queen. I got an honorary Oscar, which was basically Hollywood's way of saying, okay, maybe we were a bit harsh, here's a shiny statue, now go be old somewhere. When I went to the ceremony in 1972, the standing ovation lasted 12 minutes. 12 minutes of people applauding the memory of me. They weren't clapping for Charlie Chaplin the man, they were clapping for a ghost. My body began to betray me in the end. Strokes, frailty, the usual physical betrayals that come with time. There's nothing quite like the humiliation of a body that won't take direction anymore. For someone who'd made a career out of precision movement, it felt like the cruelest joke of all. I died on Christmas Day, 1977, which yes, sounds poetic. The world's clown exiting on the world's holiday. But don't get too misty-eyed. Death is death, whether it's wrapped in tinsel or not. The tabloids had their last laugh when a few months later, someone literally stole my body from its grave to demand ransom. Even in death, I couldn't get peace without a punchline. So the end I earned? A quiet exile in Switzerland, a few late life honors, a death on a holiday, and a posthumous kidnapping. Not exactly the cinematic fade-out I would have scripted, but fitting in its own ridiculous way. Because if my life taught me anything, it's this. The curtain doesn't fall when you're ready. It falls when it damn well pleases, and you'd better hope you've hit your mark when it does. It's funny being dead. You stop existing, but your name keeps walking around without you, smiling, tipping its hat, saying things you never said. It gets invited to parties you'll never attend. It shakes hands with people you wouldn't have let past your front gate. Apparently, I am now the greatest comedian of all time.
It's the headline.
That's the carved-in stone legacy. A genius, a pioneer, a humanitarian, a man who made the world laugh and cry. All true, in carefully curated doses. But you know what they conveniently skip over in the highlight reel? The scandals,
The lawsuits.
the exile, the politics, the fact that my personal life looked less like a Hollywood fairy tale and more like a season finale of a soap opera nobody wanted to renew. Film students dissect my work like it's scripture. They talk about the pathos in city lights and the socio-political undertones of modern times as if I was sitting there with a pipe in my mouth, plotting philosophical revolutions between takes. Newsflash, half the time I was just trying to get the gag to work without breaking my neck. Yes, there was meaning in the work, but I wasn't some omniscient prophet. Sometimes a pratfall is just a pratfall. Then there's the cult of nostalgia. People who've never even seen one of my films in full still know the bowler hat, the cane, the walk. The tramp is bigger than me now, a mascot, a brand, a Halloween costume. They slap my image on coffee mugs, t-shirts, and inspirational posters. Imagine spending decades perfecting a character only to have him reduced to clip art. That's legacy for you. And oh, the moralizing. Now I'm remembered as a saint of the working class, a champion for the downtrodden. I won't deny that was in my work, but let's not pretend I didn't live in a mansion by the lake while playing the world's favorite poor man. People like their heroes pure and their contradictions invisible. History is great at airbrushing the awkward bits. Of course, there's the flip side, the ones who still whisper the dirt. They'll remind you of the wives, the age gaps, the political controversies, the exile. They'll tell you I was egotistical, manipulative, impossible to work with, and they're not wrong either. The truth is, my legacy is a tug of war between the myth and the mess, and I'm not entirely sure which side is winning. What I do know is this: the Chaplin people talk about now isn't me. Not really. He's a character, carefully edited, endlessly rebranded, designed to fit whatever story people need him to tell. The real me, he's buried somewhere under the applause, and the headlines and the silent reels, a flawed, stubborn, brilliant, foolish man who happened to make the world laugh long enough to forget, for a moment, how cruel it could be. So what do they say about me now? They say I was a genius, a pioneer, a legend. Fine. Just remember, legends are just stories we tell to make ourselves feel better about the truth. And the truth is always a little uglier, a little funnier, and a hell of a lot more human. So, after all this, after the rats in the boarding house, the pawned coats, the endless retakes, the screaming matches on set, the tabloid dissections, the exile, the failed comeback, the applause that came 12 years too late, you still think you want to be me? Really? You think you want the fame? The legacy? The cute little silhouette stamped on coffee mugs? You think you want to wear the bowler hat and carry the cane to shuffle into a room and have everyone instantly know your name? You think you want the roar of the crowd, the flashbulbs, the global adoration? Let me tell you what else you get with that package. You get to lose your childhood before you've even had one. You get to spend your life working twice as hard as everyone else just to be taken seriously. You get to be everybody's friend on screen and nobody's friend off it. You get to have your personal life auctioned to the highest bidder by newspapers that called you a genius yesterday and a menace today. You get to be accused of political crimes for making the radical statement that people should be decent to one another. You get to be an icon that everyone recognizes but no one actually knows. You get to watch the character you created outgrow you, overshadow you, and eventually bury you. You get to stand in front of an audience that is cheering for you, only to realize they're really cheering for someone you haven't been in decades. You get the privilege of being loved for a mask you can't take off even when it starts to suffocate you. And when the curtain falls, you get your story rewritten into something cleaner, prettier, safer. They'll keep the laughs and the tears, but they'll cut the contradictions. They'll turn your life into a postcard and sell it in museum gift shops. They'll reduce you to a Halloween costume and a few sound bites about hope, love, and humanity. Meanwhile, the messy, complicated, sharp-edged human being who actually lived that life, he gets lost in the editing room. So, would you still trade places? Would you still take the cane and the mustache and the fame, knowing that it comes with the hunger, the exhaustion, the paranoia, the loneliness? Would you still take the bowler hat if I told you it feels a lot heavier than it looks? If you would, if you still think you could walk my walk and live my life, then by all means take it. Take the spotlight, take the applause, take the weight, and remember this: when the world stops laughing, the silence is deafening. Me? I've done my time in the circus. You can have my place in the ring.